Mr. Luettringhaus, a very warm welcome to the Aligned Founder podcast. How are you doing today?
Pete, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we just finished a nice breathwork session. How was that for you?
Today actually was very relaxing and grounding, I would say. Not too emotional, not too emotional, but grounding. Felt very relaxing.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was kind of the core takeaway or message from that experience, do you think?
I felt a lot of strength, but not in an overwhelming way.
Okay.
I had different journeys where it was quite a discovery how much strength actually is in the body, and now today it felt a lot more natural actually.
Okay.
Which is great.
So a bit more integrated maybe than
Absolutely.
The past. Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we'll maybe get more into those later.
Yeah.
Those other explorative journeys, but I suppose today we want to go on a bit of a journey of just learning about you and your past and your present and your future, I suppose. As a businessman, entrepreneur from Cologne originally.
Yes, absolutely.
Born and bred?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so let's just dive in. Tell me a bit about yourself. What's the 2-3 minute overview of just like what you are and what you do today?
What I do today, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I help founders and business owners increase the performance of their business, scale healthy and scale with purpose, so to say. Scaling is always not easy. Yes, scaling is always not easy. There's a couple of hurdles, and I help them overcome that. And the time before, I worked in consulting for a long time, and then at some point got into an entrepreneurial role, acquired a small company, a small agency, and then made a shift to a leadership position, which was quite a big learning. And now I felt home being an entrepreneur, and that's why I'm now building the business.
Nice. So kind of like the current state is like an integration of all the past.
Absolutely. Yeah, and besides that, I'm 44 years old. I'm German from Cologne, or recently living there, and not born in Cologne, but in a small region called Sauerland, which is quite hilly but very nice. Being married to a wife, and as a second home, I'm traveling to outside of Barcelona to Spain, having an apartment there, and spending some time at the sea and where it's a little bit warmer.
Nice. Love that. So tell me, what would you say, like if we were to try and condense your early journey into studying business, what would you say have been the 3 kind of key moments or the key defining moments in your journey to the entrepreneur you are today?
Well, I try to make it 3, or narrow it down to 3 actually, because have been a lot of defining moments, so to say. But let's say on the professional path, on the professional side, it has been, of course, I worked for Porsche Consulting quite long, for more than 8 years.
Okay.
This has been quite defining because I was there at a time where it was not so corporate, and I worked with a lot of business owners, small, medium-sized businesses, who wanted to become the Porsche of their industry, and we transferred what Porsche did very good, and helped them to apply that in their businesses. That helped me, or that shaped me, because from the very beginning, I've experienced, even as a young consultant, so to say, I experienced to be useful, helpful, and make impact, even though as working as an external person, because the approach was different at that time. It was not about just doing Excel and working long hours over an Excel sheet. Of course, that was part of the game as well, working in strategy consulting. But it's what was even more shaping for me, impactful for me, is that we were doing workshops and with companies and with leadership teams, and after less than 2 weeks, things changed. People worked differently. Organizations changed or started to change, and that was quite defining, because we realized that it's not about doing PowerPoints all the time and doing thinking about concepts. It's just about like taking the time, thinking about having conceptual thinking, but applying it and helping business owners and their leadership teams to really put things into action and hold them accountable and change the companies and help them grow. So that was quite impactful.
Just a question on that before we go on to the next two defining moments, to give you some breathing room. It sounds like quite an exciting kind of job, like working for Porsche. It's almost like you're a James Bond agent or something, like on the outside, you know? No, but so how would you describe to a 5-year-old what your role was in that position? It can be like a literate 5-year-old.
Even though I would say, I was quite young at that time and learned a lot myself, it was the role of, let's say, a sparring partner, or not a trainer who knows everything, but a sparring partner who is there and helps reflect. And at that time, since I was younger, I was more the guy who is helpful, who knows, and who always has a sparring partner himself, an older one. And as I grew through the ranks over the 8 years, it felt really like becoming a sparring partner or personal trainer, so to say. Sure. Not the guy who knows it all, but the guy who is there and reflects, and of course has a lot of specific knowledge and tools in his case, but it's really the guy or the personal trainer who makes sure that the business owner reaches his goals, or the company reaches its goals, and that the management teams, or even the people, are involved, because that was always key. It was not some work in the back. It was always like working with people. Yeah.
Nice. That's super clear. Yeah. Personal trainer for a business.
Yeah.
Or employees of a business. Cool. Second defining moment.
Well, not in the order of time, but what was definitely a defining moment was was when I entered or bought a share in an agency, in a digital agency. That was my step into the larger entrepreneurial context. I met a guy. He owned an agency, and we were brought together by a common friend, a joint friend, and I had the chance to buy a share in the agency and help it grow, because we had completely different tool sets. We were a team, had a lot of, let's say, storming and norming phase, but at the time, it was around 2017, exactly. That was when let's say, digital started to be more common, and companies wanted to like build business models, needed websites even more and stuff. And so that's when I sensed the chance that this could be great. And for the first time, putting some money, which I saved myself, putting money on the table in order to buy shares of an existing company, and then and to grow it in order to at some point have more out of it, and at the same time learning a lot of new things, which I obviously didn't know at that time what would be the biggest learnings, but at that time learning new things and being responsible for employees. We had more than 12 people at that time, and so that was a big and defining moment, to take the decision and then really just do it and go and commit to it. Actually,
What were those top learnings, would you say?
Over time, I did that for in total 3.5, almost 4 years. There's been a lot of learnings on the way, but in hindsight, or so to say, we split up at some point. Having a business partner was not always easy, and at the time I would say we failed, or we split up. We decided to split up because we didn't manage to really be aligned on the strategy, and to make the company that successful, to get the potential out of it as we could have, because we were not, as persons, we were too different, and since we knew the differences, but we weren't able to overcome it, and we didn't have a coach, an independent person who helped us and moderated the process. And we had a lot of, I would say, we had a lot of frustrations with each other. And afterwards, I was able to see it, or we were able to see it and talk about it. And so the relationship itself was not harmed, but it was a process to learn that, to discover it, and to take the decision that it would be better to split at some point.
Yeah. Okay, nice.
Besides a lot of, let's say, different business learnings, how to acquire customers, how to lead a team of 12 and growing, and handling the pressure with the upcoming COVID crisis as well, because that's what was coming at some point.
Okay, so that was up until a few years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, moment number 3.
And number 3 was is after quitting, I continued for a certain period in as a let's say self-employed consultant for doing implementing business models. And at some point, I had a larger client, and I was offered a leadership role in a company which just made an IPO, which was quite small, 250 people at that time, but it was my client, and it was very tempting. I resisted, took the CEO, I would say 2-3 months to convince me at some point. But what I felt was I could learn a lot in a completely new environment, being responsible for and leading people, growing a team in a completely exploding market. It was for electric vehicle charging infrastructure,
okay, right.
and that was exploding at that time, 2021.
Yeah.
And I was able to build a team of more than 30 people in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
And that defined me as well. And well, if you would ask for learnings there, besides like a lot of leadership learnings, the most important learning about what I had about myself was I need a certain freedom, and I'm not a person who wants to be involved in politics and stuff. And so I need my own environment, my own company. And so that's what made me exit afterwards and run my current company.
Yeah. So when did that begin?
That began ultimately 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I quitted and kept the former company which I worked in as a client. That made it easier, and it was a rocky. The industry was quite rocky at that time. After COVID, growing quite quickly, it was time for consolidation, and I helped a lot from my, let's say, I would say from my tool case and my experience. I was able to help and build the company, and so as an external. And that was the start for me to my current business, which is a consulting business, and I'm building a team currently for helping companies improve their performance and scale. That's what it was. What I said in the beginning.
Kind of consolidating, as we said, all the lessons from all of those different roles.
Exactly.
Super cool.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like basically, consolidating.
Hopefully less politics.
Huh?
Hopefully with less.
Yeah, it's not. It's politics is a big word. It's there has to be a lot of alignment, so to say, and but as long as it is efficient, I like it, and as long as everybody benefits or grows, or the company grows, the company benefits, then it's good. But if it's on the back of the company or of the people, and it serves just a small amount of people, then it's not so good anymore.
Yeah. Nice. So, as you know, with Really Align, we like to mix the kind of business world with the personal world, or more specifically personal development. So, over the span of, is that like kind of like a 12-year period from beginning in Porsche?
Yeah, that was 2008 to was 15
years.
15 years, yes.
Okay, so what would you say has been the trajectory of your own, let's say, personal development, your own growth, your own mental health? Like, what has been the highs and lows along that journey?
Well, that was quite interesting as well.
Yeah.
And highs and lows. Along the, I would say I was always into learning, and I stayed in an environment as long as I could learn something, being it like on a professional level content, being it on a personal skills, mindset, etc. Level, and so that was always very important for me. And in terms of personal development, defining was towards the end, or after ending my career at Porsche, I did a business coach training, because I felt I wanted to be more efficient and more impactful in my communication. It's not about directing and leading by directing. It's more about giving advice and helping now my clients or my team to develop and see things which they might have not seen before, and by asking questions. So this classic leadership coaching approach. And that helped me, for example, as well, to be a better consultant, not by saying things which I think need to be done. It's more by opening others' eyes and being able and enabling them to understand and see things they need to see. That was a huge part for me in my personal development.
Yeah.
That was just one thing.
What would you say is like a blind spot or downside for someone in a leadership position if they haven't actually done some of that work and understood more the fundamentals of human behavior, psychology, how to coach or lead?
Yeah. Definitely is that you end up asking yourself, or that you find yourself in a position explaining over and over, maybe explaining things, and people not understanding or seemingly not understanding, and not at the end not doing the things, and or being not doing that, being that productive, being that happy in their roles, because they just get told what to do. And
whereas intrinsic kind of
it's not
motivation,
intrinsic. And if you coach the people, it's much more. You see them growing, and that was for me at least. First of all, eye-opening, and then that was a huge part of my motivation, giving my teams and colleagues, my teams, the chance to find solutions that on by themselves, and seeing them grow, becoming better leaders themselves, becoming better people themselves. So, and I would say you miss that if you get asked for advice or for a specific solution, and you know the solution and you just tell it. Compared to you help people discovering their own solution and coming up with their own solution. I mean, today it's the basis of agile, because otherwise we couldn't.
You become the bottleneck.
Exactly.
And they rely on you, basically.
But at that time, I felt like for many it's completely. For many of my teams as well, it was a great discovery to experience themselves in solving problems, in finding own approaches.
Yeah. It's funny. So my dad is like a business consultant, does some accounting stuff as well. And in Ireland, for much more traditional businesses, like obviously here in Berlin, there's a lot of founders, in their maybe 30s, 40s, a bit more like ahead of the game with all this stuff. But I think for more classic businesses, like the traditional business owner is kind of like, I can't get good people anywhere,
Exactly.
And they don't look at themselves.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think there's a big part of this, like, as we said, like the intrinsic motivation, the why. There's an analogy I like to use is, if I put you in a room and made you lick stamps for 10 hours a day for 10 days, you probably wouldn't enjoy it very much.
No, not at all.
But if I told you that at the end of it, there was 10 million euros for licking those stamps, then actually every stamp you licked would be bringing you one step closer to the 10 million, you know? So you'd actually probably quite enjoy it, you know, because you'd be thinking about all the things you could do. So what I like to say is that, like, if there's a lack of motivation by a team, we'll say, it's not that they're bad people or they're not motivated. It's just that the why hasn't been clearly defined, you know?
Yeah, that's often the case. And giving them freedom to, let's say, to stick with that example, to lick the stamps the way they think is the best and see as long as they secure the outcome. Because you've defined the outcome and not like exactly how they need to lick it. And that's my heritage as well. I come from quite traditional businesses as well. That's what I learned. And afterwards shifting more and more over the years to, let's say, founder-led businesses, but still working with that, let's say, traditional businesses as well. And there are even more learnings, and that's interesting still, because like here in Berlin, the founders I know, of course, for them OKR is no mystery. Providing a vision and providing a purpose is clear. But for like more traditional businesses, they know on a superficial level that they should do it, because it otherwise would be even harder to get people. But to experience what it means to do it and then really to do it, it's that's a different story, and it's often hard.
There's a certain level of surrender that needs to happen, because it's your child and you're effectively giving it to someone else.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And in theory, you could know that it's good to give your child to someone else, but like when those reactionary behaviors come in and the fear, you know, comes in,
absolutely.
The default could be to snap back to taking control, which might feel good in the moment, but it ultimately limits growth.
And that's a important point you're making. That's part of what I'm working with the founders or business owners as well. It's the part of the personal development. Experiencing what it means to at some point letting go and letting people find the solutions by themselves. And resisting the impulse when they come and ask, how should I do or what should I do? Resisting the impulse to exactly provide that answer. Instead, telling them, okay, what would you do? And making them think and seeing that they actually enjoy it. And don't get insecure. And when you see them enjoying it, then you're sure you have the right people. Exactly.
It's kind of like, in a way, also the child needs to touch the fire to feel what it feels like. Because you can say, don't touch it, but then it never actually learns, you know? So it's kind of like, again, back to this short term, like maybe trying to solve a problem quickly, but ultimately you're not creating growth long term. And for people, I would imagine like the kind of team you want to attract long term would be growth mindset people.
Absolutely.
Anyway, you know, not just robots. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't afford, because otherwise, in like how quickly the world changes, you need to your people to think and take action and setting the direction. That's the role of the leader or the business owner, setting the direction, setting the boundaries, and providing the budget to change, bring the company to the right track. But the rest is the work of the people. And another point you were making is about, let's say, like the child touching the oven is about controlled risk. So it's really about what I believe strongly in is to know where you can take a risk of that things fail and maybe let it fail, because that's how we all as humans learn, by making mistakes.
It's almost like, you know, I could save this ship from sinking, but how much of my own personal energy would it take? And is that something I want to do? And is it going to serve anyone?
Absolutely.
On that note, based on all the experience you have, and knowing now the kind of business you like to run and who you like to work with, what would you say is the sweet spot of like the perfect client? If they turned up on your doorstep tomorrow, you'd say, that's the one.
We help clients to overcome that hurdle once you grow, when you need to build a second management layer, basically, because that's when the company gets out of control. Normally, once you're the founder, you're the CEO, and you know everything, you hired most of the people by yourself, and at some point you see that you need managers or leaders leading other managers. And so you need a second level, and then you can either multiply the chaos, or you can keep the company aligned. And that's the point where either quickly before, then I help to overcome that hurdle, defining processes, making sure the vision and the strategy is clear, and building that well-oiled machine before or shortly afterwards, because I was one of those second-layer managers at some point myself and discovered the chaos which is there. Sometimes more, sometimes less controlled, but we discovered the roots are missing structure, missing strategy, clarity, vision, and alignment, and so everybody runs into his direction or leads his team and his managers into different directions, and then the company is simply not aligned. And so that's the level of or the size of companies where I come in.
And that's quite contradictory to what we just talked about before, which is giving everyone freedom and autonomy. You know, like
Exactly.
you know, if there's, it's like we need freedom, but also like structure as well to play within. And that structure can't be, I'd imagine the initial response might be for people to be too rigid or too loose. So it's a dance, I'd say. So if you were to put a number of like, okay, so let's say you've got that founder with the team underneath him, what would be the point at which that founder would need to transition to a bigger team? Like what number of employees or what kind of size business? What would be the sweet spot usually?
Depending. I mean, it's hard to say the other way around. When I come in, it's typically about more than 30, 40 people. Sometimes it's even more than 100, but it's that's even more likely, I would say. But even with the 30, 40 people, you feel that you need different heads for different teams, or that you have different heads for different teams, and that alignment is not always clear, and that you're spending a lot of time as a founder, as an owner, spending a lot of time explaining and oftentimes being operational yourself. Whereas on the other side, your biggest job might be fundraising or making sure that more money is coming in, because you might not be profitable at that time, and that's where I come in and help. So starting at 30, 40, but obviously being up or going up to 100, 150 person as well.
So would that be beyond C-level people then? It'd be more managers, or could it also be C-level people as well?
C-level people and managers.
Would be,
yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what would you say for a company that like just tries to do that themselves? What do you typically see as the three biggest kind of pitfalls or the things they do wrong that creates the chaos?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Because there's a lot of let's say help out there, and a typical, like, one pattern is obviously what you could do is try harder. So maybe read a book and try to apply your thing. Maybe have a COO. If you're the CEO, have a COO and outsource, so to say, and hand the difficulties to the COO. But just try harder. That was option one. Option two is clearly go into an organization or take a course, for example, like EO, for example. You have exchange with other entrepreneurs, but the point we discovered is, or I tapped into myself, with the agency at that time, having exchange, spending many weekends with other entrepreneurs and having a lot of exchange, building strategies over the weekend, discussing them with other peers from different backgrounds, different companies. But then it comes Monday morning, I go back into my agency, and other leaders as well go back into their companies and say, okay, I had this idea over the weekend, we should do this and that, but nobody understands. And nobody knows, and it's perceived as either on top, which is disturbing the normal routines, or nobody really understands because has not been involved in that thought process. There's at least, in best case, there's not enough buy-in, but and so you end up explaining too much, and you just won't get it done that quickly as you could if you develop it by a team, and if you have like this. So to say, personal trainer, coach who holds yourself accountable and works with you and your team to get alignment on what are the most important priorities, what are the projects which should be done, and what are the projects which should not be done, because that's equally important as well. Knowing the things should be done and knowing the things which could be left aside and not be done.
Well, it's almost like, if we think of a company like a relationship between the leader and the employees, as a two partners in a relationship. If one partner brings in a therapist and says, now we need to do this work, the other partner is probably going to go, well, exactly. No, I don't like it, Exactly. Whereas if they come to the decision internally and then it's an internal process together, they're much more likely to buy in and be on board.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot of sports analogies, and so there's always this. The most popular one is clearly the one of the football coach or of the Fußballtrainer, soccer coach standing at the sideline and the players on the field. But the founders, the business owners themselves, and the ones I work with, the ones I know, almost everybody has a personal trainer when he does sports. They work out, and it's totally clear. There's no question that everybody knows that having a trainer or a coach who holds you accountable, with who helps you to set your goals, no matter if you want to run faster, run a marathon, or reach whatever goal, it goes a lot better with a person who holds you accountable and maybe comes with its knowledge. And helps you develop your plan and your milestones, which were the steps you need to take, and someone you could ask questions from time to time, and exactly.
Why do you think that people treat it differently in business then?
I think from time to time it's a lot of it might be a little bit burnt, like consultants is not. It's not a good notion. That's one thing.
Or and I experienced coaches in general also.
In coaches in general is quite difficult. And so it's quite depending on the person that and how it's perceived. And I myself experienced you have a very short period of time where you can prove yourself or your approach, how you work with the people. If you make it to reach the people, then check, they will work with you. If you don't,
sayonara.
Exactly.
See you later.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have a chance to create any or help create any impact. Yeah.
So, what have been some of the things then in the past years you've been doing to not just on a business level, like all the experience and growth, but to also work on yourself personally that have really helped you kind of now step into that full role where you're at today?
Well, of course, the latest or most defining or helpful has been meditation, and then afterwards starting to do breath work as well. Meditation, I started quite early. I had a personal relationship crisis in 2012. And I was lucky enough that my wife at that point discovered that this might be a helpful tool.
Yeah.
Because I was drowned with work. We had, in our relationship, we had a crisis. And at that point, she discovered a meditation retreat and said, okay, it might be helpful if you go there. And so and it was, and so that was the start. And the guy was a German Zen monk. He was a consultant before, trained in Japan, spent a lot of time in Japan, and for me it was easy to cope with because it wasn't fluffy at all, because the time I discovered meditation 2012 was quite easy. Was not that not many people spoke about it, but since at Porsche I was very familiar with this Japanese principles of lean management, lean in general, and I was in Japan before and looked at some monasteries just by pure interest, and then this guy was trained in monastery, and so we talked a lot about all those principles and how it helped, and so the whole meditation was in that Japanese spirit, so to say, and that made it quite interesting and fascinating for me. And this Zen meditation at that time, it was just about sitting still and not thinking, and that was obviously very hard. So, but it helped. It was about training. It was not about sitting there and doing it instantly. It was about training. It was training for the mind, and I felt over the following weeks and a month becoming clearer. And so that was one of the tools which helped me a lot. And then besides, let's say, technical training or other trainings I did, the meditation was the most impactful. And then nowadays the breath work, which we do, that is, I would say, even more helpful in life than in business. The business gets, luckily, I need to say, luckily gets to the side. It's about being a lot more able or easier to navigate the life, where business is just one part. But taking decisions, more tough decisions in a better way, and be feeling more connected and feeling more confident with the decisions I take, no matter in business or in life, in relationships, in things like that as well. Yeah.
So we talk about that journey because you mentioned Zen before, which is actually Bjorn, who's my co-founder, who was actually the link between how we came together. He's a big proponent of Zen, and I think he's actually on a meditation retreat with Zen at the moment. And he loves that. He speaks quite highly of it. He says he thinks that actually it went the other way for him. It was like almost like finding breath work, and then it allows him to go deeper in the Zen because there's so much stillness and clarity, and regulation from the breath, that now he can go super deep in the meditations that he never could have. If he'd meditated 10,000 hours before, maybe he wouldn't have reached, because there's just not the hardware to process the software in a way, But he was the reason. So I think you listened to the podcast that we did with him, and we got in touch, and I was saying, okay, let's try find a time for a session, and we couldn't find it. And then we were on this workshop in March, I think, in Berlin. So tell me about that experience. We came together, we were learning about the nervous system, doing lots of breathing sessions. What was the big takeaway from that first experience of breathwork for you?
That was quite interesting. First of all, I totally agree with what you said. Like like the breath work impacts the meditation and the other way around. So I can relate to that. And since we started, or I had my first breathwork journey with you in March. That was interesting because it was a lot more emotional than I expected it to be, and it was the first time I felt a certain, let's say, strength in my body. I mean, I know when I work out, when I go to the gym and work out, I feel strong. But this was different. This was coming from the inside and feeling as if I grew into a bit more into my body. Not like the pump what you have coming from the gym, but it's really feeling in a very nice way, in a very calm way, grounded way, strong, and that was interesting, grounding. I think that was the second thing, which is like having even reaching a different level of clarity on certain topics in this case in my private life I have not experienced before, I would say. So that's where the breath work helps. And what I found I would say I'm a quite factual based person. I prefer to work with data, and so the whole breath work, I was a little bit, let's say, hesitant, or it needed to convince me in the beginning, and it did by the fact that it's in the end no special form of breathing or something. I read something about Wim Hof, for example, but I learned that this is another route, a completely different style of breath work, what he does, and that was even better. So the whole breath work got demystified, and it's just getting into a normal, steady, constant breathing rhythm to access the subconscious, and that's why it's so powerful, I would say.
Yeah, that, you think you summed it really nice there, because there's a lot of talk about breathwork. What is it? What isn't it? You know, is it this one? I did that one. I already did that. I tried that already. So this is the same. And it really, there's many different styles. I'd say the main, as I think you summed it pretty well, but like this idea of like when we can switch off the thinking mind and allow this breath to take over when we start with a rhythm. Accessing, the deeper stuff that's kind of held and stored. And even though it may not make sense or even sound very convincing to say, I access the deep inner strength. It's like, sure. But like when you feel it, it's a whole other story.
Absolutely. And it's good to experience that it's like, it's not spiritual in the first place. Because many people resist when it comes to that. But it's like, we came together in a group of, let's say, business people, and it was no spiritual stuff at all. It was really, it's a tool, and so we experienced that, and it helped everybody, and so and at the end there's a lot more, let's say, clarity and groundedness, and that reflects directly how I work and how I handle my relationships as well. As well in business as well as in private life, in any situation.
For someone, let's say, who's very, because, you know, when we talk about these concepts of like finding my inner power and stuff, like there's a lot of, we'll say, cognitive speak in the field of personal development and also maybe business as well, of like how people like to be very in their mind and say these things because the buzzwords, you know. What would you say is actually the main thing, that the difference between actually doing that just mind-based focused stuff, like, you know, a lot of coaching and stuff, versus actually feeling things on a deeper level? Like what has shifted for you, and what could change for someone if they were to try that, if they've previously only been in their head?
The level of confidence of decisions, or the level of confidence of decisions, I would say, because I had we worked together for half a year now, and that time on a personal side it was challenging in terms of I had to take one or the other decision, and so the level of confidence, because I feel it in my body, is a different thing than just making, let's say, the opposite would be making a list of plus and minus and say, okay, well, which is the better option, and more pros than cons, and so I take the decision and go. But then you're also questioning, was it the right decision? Exactly. I might tweak my own list or cheat myself, but being confident and feeling it is a different story. So that's and that gives confidence and clarity. Yeah, the way it's been described in the past by some clients is like the inner compass or the inner metal detector. Yeah, that's a good way. You feel it when it's the truth, and then yes, there can be information for other things, but you can't fight the truth, you know. And it's a gut feeling on a different level. I would say, because you can. I had that in my past a lot, and I think everybody knows that. Trusting the gut feeling, or making lists and collecting arguments, but it's a lot more than just, so to say, than just the gut feeling. If you're choosing which, you know, car to buy, then that could be a rational decision. But when it's like something as deeper as, like, you know, actual relationships and anything that involves emotions, really, can be a different side. So for instance, you know, I could tell you that my gut feeling is, my partner I dated in 2017, she was the perfect partner, you know, because my gut feeling tells me, but I actually found out it was all my fucking trauma shit from the past, you know. So it's kind of like, we can't always trust our gut feeling, and a lot of times people will come and say like, like I feel this, but is it right, or is it me maybe replaying an old wound, or, you know, recreating an old situation? So I think having access to that like unshakable truth is very valuable. That's a good word for that, unshakable truth, because it's you have a different level of trust in your own, in the story you create, or in your own truth.
And I've found that like when I follow that, like even if it's absolutely terrifying, there's almost like, a lot of logical things would be saying you're crazy.
Yeah.
But when I follow it, it's almost like going into the eye of the storm and emerging on the other side, and it's just clarity, peace,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's the way. So then, so we had that first weekend, and then you joined our Georgia men's retreat. So tell me about that experience. How was that for you?
That was a great experience. Why did I sign up for it? Because I was curious what's behind like experiencing more of the breath work. That was one thing, but the second thing is, I think like many of my business friends, so to say, I've a little over the last couple of years, I've a little bit outsourced the relationship building to my wife, so to say. Yeah. So I knew that she would take care about the relationships, and I used the time for working. I was very happy when we had guests or when we met people, but it was all the time organized by mostly by my wife, I would say. And over the time, I discovered like we as men have different conversations, and I'm not talking about going for beer and talking about the daily stuff. It's more about important fundamental topics like how do I develop as an entrepreneur, as a leader, and what are the questions in life which come up between 35 and 45 at that period, and which I didn't discuss with a not so close friend over a beer. And so that was pulling me as well to have exchanged just with men, and it was totally, I would say it was totally normal, because it's like not at all, we value the feminine perspective a lot, but being quite close, or it held true that we it took just hours to get close to understand and open up in that group. And so that was one of the biggest takeaways, I would say, as well, to connect with people, with men I didn't know before, and everybody being very open about the topics, problems from the past, which shaped him and influenced his private life, his business, his, let's say, even his personal development, and seeking not advice, but opinions from the group, and being able to open up and speak. Reflections, exactly. And speaking about it, that was quite good. Yeah.
And there's something as well about, I think, like if I'm a guy, I don't want to go to my partner for everything as well.
No.
Like she's not my therapist, Yeah.
I
think there's some topics that it's important to go and have a trusted group, and that's not just the guys having a beer talking about the football.
Yeah.
At the bar. It's like that we can have actually like deep, authentic conversations. And I really do see that as a bit of an epidemic with men in general, about not having like that depth of connection. And we could talk about like male suicide rates and stuff, but like I think that underpinning a lot of that is there being a disconnection, and then no one wants to make the first move because everyone's kind of like a bit unsure of like, is that okay? Can I talk about that? We're kind of conditioned to push this stuff down because it might make us seem weak or vulnerable.
Absolutely.
But actually the strength can be in bringing that forward. And I think the creation of a kind of space like in Georgia, the men's retreat, is like one where the baseline is just total openness. Well, that's step one.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And from that place, it's like, actually, it's almost like the permission is there to just all the stuff that maybe would never have even consciously seen the light of day gets to bubble to the surface. And then it just becomes normal to share that, and the liberation of that, of being seen in that and sharing something that maybe I've held down my whole life. I didn't think was ever, like, it's almost like I've locked it in a broom closet somewhere.
Yep.
Like, you should never come out. And then for it to not just be allowed out, but then to actually be celebrated is like, yeah, it's very powerful.
And that's what you just mentioned, or many of the examples. Exactly, it's like the baseline is being ready to be completely open, and at the same time it was very easy. One of the guys started, and from that point the ice was broken.
Yeah.
And I would say the best experience is it was that of course we talked at some point about our businesses, what we do, but I think it started on the second evening at some side note. So it wasn't, it was not the status which counted. It was really about like everybody as a person, and that was quite eye-opening. And it felt really good to not have this status barrier, or to prove what you've done first, but much more showing, okay, who you are and what brought you here, and then being open about your story, so to say. And then you get a lot of reflections, and that helped. And at the same time, it formed a great group where I would say we're in touch, and happy to see everybody developing, and from that point on handling things which might have blocked everybody a lot easier afterwards.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who's kind of maybe thinking about doing such an experience, like a men's retreat or something like that?
Yeah, no doubt you should do it. It's especially, I would say, combined with like the physical distance. We went to Georgia, a place not in the US, but in at the Caucasian, exactly at the foot of the Caucasian mountains. So flying to a remote place and then spending 6 hours on a mini bus in order to get to a chalet. Is a different thing, because you're putting yourself, taking physical distance to everything, or to your normal environment.
Yeah.
You can't go there in the evenings from 6 to 8 or something.
After work, kind of.
No, not at all, no chance. And so you need to commit for 5 days being completely remote in a place you've never been. And so that's for everybody who's there. And so that makes it, let's say, even more special. And so you have a chance to meet very interesting people on a personal side, and so that's and you yourself as well. Yeah.
What would you say were some of your biggest takeaways from that experience personally?
Personally, I would say as the least was being in which direction I want to shift the business. Or I would say I got a bit clearer about, let's say, the ideal client situation. I'm at my best. That was one thing I got clarity on. But handling or getting clarity on conflict situation in the family, for example. And how it is impacted by the past, and what are the roles, or what are the people who are involved in the conflict. In this case, in my family, and how it is like. I was able to see that because I had some time to reflect much more openly on things like that, and not by thinking harder. But experiencing the whole setting and the breath work, and doing different exercises, I was able to see a different context then, and that was, I would say, for me the biggest takeaway. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So being a lot of putting existing things, conflicts, challenges into a new or better perspective, and afterwards at the end having a clear path, seeing a clear path forward. So I knew what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's next on the horizon for you?
what's next? Building the business, because that's quite interesting. We have a couple of things coming up, especially because I changed the approach. It's like I was always, as I said in the beginning, I was always driven by making impact with my clients. For me, the biggest driver is that I see things changing, and people learning and doing it, by creating impact by themselves. And so I could have gone for a CEO role, and I rejected and chose to take that route as a, let's say, sparring partner for businesses, because I could simply work with more business owners, and more leadership teams. And since we changed the approach, I changed the approach a bit, working together over, let's say, 6 months, and then having a certain form of sprints, and really seeing things developing and making impact. And that's what I would like to scale. So my challenge is scaling my business as well. And
ironically,
yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Ironically, yeah, exactly. And at the same time, finding as well the right people as well. I started recruiting, looking for people, and thinking now, do I onboard a partner, or do I, on my level, stay on my own? So that's a question which is to be clarified, because I really like to work in teams and to have a partner, and so I'm building the team as well. That's the next challenge.
Well, I think you've got some experience in that, so
absolutely.
Should be
And I enjoyed a lot, simply, and talking to many people and finding the right people. It has always been interesting, but I really enjoy it, and then seeing that working out when the people are onboarded. So yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If someone wants to get in touch, maybe they have a 40 to 100 person company that needs a new leadership team or that kind of thing, how can they find you and get in touch?
I think the best way is on over the LinkedIn profile, and on the website, which is going to be launched over the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so
by the time this episode's edited,
exactly.
I'll drop it in the show notes below.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice one. Well, Sebastian, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to.
Many more breathworks and journeys together.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pete.
You're very welcome.